Thank you so much, Alex, for having yourself on the podcast. We would definitely love to, have your thoughts and insights over the industry. A little bit about myself. I completed my master's in technology management from New York University. I was there in the Bay Area from around July, August of 2023 to November. And that's when I connected with Daniel and we started this podcast series. I did a couple of consulting job in fintech with companies like Checkbook.io, Mercoa. Currently, I'm also working with Daniel on JustPaid. So that's how a little bit about myself. Currently, I'm based in India. I was in New York after I was in the Bay Area, so a couple of different cities, and just having my foot in the fintech world. I am just passionate about it and love to get perspective from the amazing founders I we get on the podcast.
Love it. Thanks for the overview.
Yeah, and I guess just to start things off, like I believe you're one of the only two timers that went through YC. So this is your second time, correct? Like doing YC,
You're
Alex,
a
or
two,
no?
you're a two-timer.
Yeah. I mean, that was what made me you stand out for
Yeah.
for for doing it. But I guess like starting out, like why even become an entrepreneur? Like I guess just let's go back a little bit of like your history, and then we can get into like why do YC two times, but like why even like be an entrepreneur? Like, what made you even start the first time, and what made you get into YC that first time, and like why do that?
Thanks, Daniel. It's cool being on this because I knew of you when you were running your first company at Dr. Chrono, and then to be in the same batch with you the second time around, working in the same general sphere, general world of finance software is pretty damn cool for me. So really, thanks for having me on here. First time around, hmm. I was a VC in my prior life. Spent the bulk of my time investing, spent a little bit of time parachuting into portfolio companies to help them with their accounting and finance needs, kind of like acting like a low-key finance manager. But I think the impetus to starting a company the first time was less about the company itself and more about there's these two really smart and talented people that I wanted to work with. And the way it came together was starting a company together. We wanted to build a financial data platform. So think kind of segment for financial data. One guy was a software engineer, the other guy was a data engineer. And so came together, had a blast working with each other, found some early customers that understood and bought into what we were working on. And I think it was from that standpoint very organic, the way it kicked things off. YC was have just having been in the valley and investing here, you hear a lot about all the accelerators. So was really, I think, lucky and fortunate to get into YC the first time around. The reason why I went through it the second time, I think it boils down to community. The money is definitely very helpful, but the community that you get being part of YC and how it serves as like an automated warm intro, right? When you reach out to another YC founder, I don't know, when you see an email coming from a YC founder, I always read it. I always at least respond. I may or may not be able to hop on every call, but at least respond to it, right? And that kind of community and the commitment everyone has to giving back to it. That's the reason why I did it the second time, because I wanted to continue being an active member of that community and to be a part of another batch, especially one that was going back to being in person.
I mean, one day Agam might start his own company, and just like talking about it, like you did it the first time with friends, like and being an investor, I guess you had an insider view. Were you like originally in Silicon Valley, or did you move here specifically to become an investor? And there's a lot of people out there that want to be investors. They don't know how to get into it. Like it seems like you had an insider view of just like the valley. I guess like maybe we could peel that back a little bit and talk about like, did you come out of school and say maybe you knew somebody, or your family was into it, or like you just got a really good job right out of school? Like what was it? And how did you become an investor, first of all?
I think I was definitely an outsider coming in, and once you break in, I think you very quickly become an insider. So what do I mean by that? I was a Boeing engineer to start my career. And despite all the negative press about it lately, I think it's a fantastic company. I admire the products that they build. My dad worked in the satellite and rocket industry, so in a way, it was almost like coming full circle for the family to have the eldest son work in aerospace. I went to get my MBA at Columbia. I had a blast there. Knew I wanted to get in venture capital, but didn't really know how to go from an MBA to VC, especially coming from call it a non-traditional background in old school corporate manufacturing. I'd say my way in, it was definitely a lot of hustle, and in the hustle, I got lucky along the way. So on one hand, I want to say I got lucky, but on the other hand, I want to give myself a little bit of credit that I worked hard to create that luck. And it was certainly through the generosity of certain folks. This person I knew was starting a fund. He gave me a shot and I interned for him. And that helped me take the next step to somebody who had a fund and was looking for an intern. So I interned for him and got my first couple deals under my belt, which then led to someone else who had a fund and was hiring someone full time. So it was certainly incremental steps, but I did get lucky in meeting the right people who wanted to take a chance at me. And once I got in, then that's what I mean. Once you're in, then you quickly become an insider. You meet a lot of people, you hear a lot of things. Suddenly, the whole world of Silicon Valley came much more clear to me as to how it works around here and how everyone seems to know everybody because there's no shortage of events and parties in Silicon Valley.
Would you feel like would you have preferred to have been a founder first or a investor first? Like what was a better track? I mean, now you know both sides of it, I guess, two sides of the coin, which a lot of people don't. And clearly you picked the entrepreneur path like long term, but like what would you have started with initially just to like build your career?
I'm not sure I would do it any differently. I think if I were to do it differently, it could have ended up the same way. So let's maybe that's my nuanced answer. Tactically, what I mean, as a junior investor, and speaking candidly, you don't learn too many hard skills in VC, right? It's a sales job. It's a lot of selling. So certainly learn a bit about sales on that job that I didn't get before. But could I have gotten that skill set working as a AE or, in partnerships or BDR? Yeah, definitely. You definitely could. And I think what I learned, one skill that I gained from VC was learning how to think about markets, learning how to think about businesses and what makes a good business. But what I lacked on was what makes a what makes a good startup from the inside, like from an operating standpoint, right? The day to day. I didn't get that visibility. So this notion of like knowing what excellence looked like when I was starting my startup, my first one, I didn't know what excellence looked like. I didn't understand it because I was never part of that. So I think that was definitely one of those learnings I had to learn the hard way of stumbling through it, seeing other people who I think were excellent or doing the right things and trying to model myself after them. So to answer your question more directly, I think it could have gone either way from an impact standpoint and where I ended up. So would I choose to do it differently? No, I had a great time doing VC, but could have gone the other way and still ended up where I am. I mean, the VC, when it comes to the skills you learn in like fundraising and how deals work, there's no doubt that's helpful, right? Like I can talk to an investor and know off the top of my head what the terms mean and the implications to the cap table. Problem is, you do that once every year, 18 months, whatever it is. It's not too often a skill I get to pull on.
Got it. So you were able to leverage that, like at least with your first startup, to feel that affinity towards like investors and what they do. It's funny, like a lot of entrepreneurs put investors on a pedestal almost, like they're oracles and they know the answers to things. And I feel like you kind of you're taking it from a different lens where it's like almost marketing yourself to get that deal for that investment that you want. So doing sales in a sense. So to everybody listening, I would say it's definitely like it's good to actually see it from an investor's perspective, which you actually gives you an advantage, honestly, as an entrepreneur, which a lot of founders don't have. Um, Agam, do you have questions? I've been kind of dominating so far.
I want to comment on, Daniel, what you just said
Sure,
there.
sure.
Um, I, s- I don't think we should be trying to say the right string of words to get an investor to invest. It's a long-term journey. You know this far better than I do, that we should sell the vision, the narrative, but be very candid. This is what we're building towards, and this is how our view of our company and the market and what we're going to do about it. Um, but one thing I'll say is one thing I learned being on both sides. An investor sees what 1,000 deals a year, right? That's 100 deals a month, 20, 25 a week. That's a lot of companies to go through. So it's very like stamp judgments whether I'm going to spend more time on it because they need to think about managing their time allotment. Whereas in our jobs, we're getting very detailed because our customers care. Where does this button go? When you click this, what happens next? Yada, yada, yada. There's this whole sequence of details we get into. And I think we can't help but to talk about it because we live in it day in and day out. That's not fundraising, at least not the first couple meetings, right? You got to know how to zoom out, tell the big picture story. And then later on, as you go deeper into due diligence, maybe peel back the layers more. But that was a lesson I learned, I think, the hard way. Once I became a founder, I got too entrenched in the details that I would obsess over talking about it. Got to know when to do it, when not to. I wanted to react to your comments there.
No, that's really, really good feedback. It's serious saying don't go into the weeds too fast with an investor because they're kind of maybe they're not catching the nuance of like what you're saying, and you're just saying big picture because they're seeing 5 deals today and they're seeing 25 deals a week. It's if you go too deep too fast, you might lose them and they might lose interest because they're seeing so much at a fast rate. They may just say, I don't understand what this entrepreneur is saying. He clearly has lost me. How do you know when you lose an investor? Is there like tells?
Hmm. I think when they're really engaged, investors are smart. Gotta hand it to them. And they ask when they understand what's going on, they ask the right questions, right? Especially the ones who've been in the industry a long time with the skill of pattern matching and all the companies they've seen, they'll figure out the right questions to ask. So when their eyes kind of zone out and they're kind of like pausing and trying to figure out the next question, as opposed to they're kind of leaning in and they try to cut you off because they got what they needed. They want to move on to the next question. Like they're really because they're starting to see the puzzle come together. So it's the ones where they're really leaning into the next question and they're trying to drive things a certain way. And sometimes you got to be careful, right? When they drive the conversation too much, maybe it's taking you want it to go another direction. But it's that dance that happens in the conversation where both parties are so engaged. That's when you know the conversation's going well. When it's just one-sided and we're trying to figure out how to get to the end of the 30 minutes, not sure it went too well then.
Got it. Got it. Any
I,
like
on that, I'd love to get your take. You've done that far more. So what have you seen works with investors?
I mean for me I think in the past like not totally pitching them but understanding their mindset is really important, like asking them where they came from and why they're an investor. I think really just flipping it a little bit, which a lot of entrepreneurs don't do. They kind of go into like this immediate pitch. And when you do that, you kind of don't know what they're thinking about, what their thesis is like for investing. They may not have the capital like allocation that you might want. If you want $30,000, but they have to put $1 million in, it's like that's not a good fit. So you have to ask questions like how much do you like allocate, how often, for me, I always ask what, like we went through demo day with Y Combinator. I asked this one question: how many Y Combinator companies have you invested in this quarter? That gives me an indicator myself, like, okay, this is how active this investor is in like the YC community. I mean, that's some of the strategy. I ask a lot of questions back, which some investors like. It might throw some off just because they want to get info on me a lot of the time, but I like to like get that information. from them so I could see if they're like a good fit. It works. I think it might rub some investors the wrong way, but others it actually gets them really engaged. But I need to know it because I'm pitching them. I want to know where their head's at with just, investing possibly in the company. There are some tells to see if an investor is not so active if they haven't made any investments in like 2 years, which I've asked that question and some people have said that. And I'm like, okay, so they clearly are like waiting for something or some event, or there's a huge hesitancy. And it's not just me, it's bigger market wise, like why they're not investing. But, and then others will say they made 15 investments this week. And I'm like, oh, wow, they're really engaged. Like they're deploying capital. Why? Like, why are they doing that? So it's, you're right. There's a song and dance, like there's like a dance that happens with investors.
The questions that you ask, I mean, you're also trying to qualify. You're trying to see if this is where I should spend my time on, because not all investors are equal, right? Some of them funds could be fully deployed, so they're not actively investing. They're trying to trying to keep a pulse on the market. Well, you need to qualify that quickly, so you know whether or not you should spend more time on this or not. And then similarly, kind of like in sales, as you ask these questions, you understand what they care about. Do they want you to spend more time on market? Do they want you to spend more time on product? Did they bring like an in-house EIR in to evaluate the technology and want to spend more time there? Those though may not be immediately obvious before the call, and it's your job to get there early on in the call so you know where to spend the bulk of the call on, what's going to be the highest leverage.
Right. That's actually really, really insightful. Really, really good feedback. Agam, you've been quiet the whole time and you're hearing all this. Where did you go to school? You went to school in New York.
I did my undergrad at USC in Los Angeles, and then went to
Okay.
Columbia for my MBA.
Columbia is in New York, correct? Okay. You went to school also, Agam, in New York, correct? So,
Yeah, I mean the two big schools in New York City. I was in NYU, so I have like a lot of folks in Columbia as well. So my question to you is about Truewind and what's the problem Truewind is currently solving using AI. I know it's an AI company, and why is it the right time or interesting time in the market for the product like Truewind, and what excited you to solve that particular problem?
A lot of layers to peel back there. First of all, I gotta say, um, certainly had a great time at Columbia, but that 30-minute subway ride to get to downtown, it felt longer and longer every week and month I was there. And I thought, man, the NYU students have it good. They're right there. So there, your campus is in the middle of it. But to answer your question around Truewind, so my first company was a company called Blue Light, focused around data. With Truewind, the focus is more around workflow, because I think when it comes to financial operations, it's really more of a workflow problem. We're building an AI-powered accounting and finance solution. So that's vague, I know. Specifically, what does that mean? Picture an AI assistant for accountants and financial analysts. The day-to-day work that they need to do that is so mundane, that is so repetitive, and it's not occasional. Like this is literally their job every day. What can we do using AI and LLMs to make their job far more pleasant and delightful? How do we get away from manual Excels, creating them and tracking them, and more into a one-click experience? And so that's what we've gone out to the market to build. To answer your last question around why is now the right time and why it couldn't be done before, does beg to question, right? Like in all things accounting, why haven't we automated accounting? It's rules and numbers, but it's not just rules and numbers. It's kind of more like guidelines. There's some ambiguity in it, and there's room left for human interpretation, right? Whether how conservative you want to be. And also when it comes to the number standpoint, it's not just numbers, there's meaning behind those numbers. The example I like to give is the purchase of a simple cup. Daniel, you being a co-founder and CEO of a startup, if you go down the street and you buy a cup to use in the office, that's an office expense. But if I work in your neighborhood Blue Bottle and I buy that same cup, that might be classified as a cost of goods sold. You and I could look in the situation and know exactly why the difference. But technology would be like, it's the same date, the same amount, and the same transaction description, but it's two different outcomes. How do you guys get there? And it's because of what our businesses do and why did you make that purchase? And that information is stored in natural language. So that's why I think with LLM, so much of accounting and finance gets unlocked. We can capture context behind the numbers. Thanks,
Would you say that Truewind is trying to compete with a QuickBooks or complement a QuickBooks?
We've taken a very deliberate position to complement a QuickBooks. So we'll work with any general ledger, whether it's QBO, integrate with Xero, Sage Intacct, NetSuite. We work closely with our friends at Puzzle. Sasha, the CEO there, I think is fantastic. So GL agnostic, I like to say.
Got it. And what like why this space? So the first one was like a data play. Then you went into this. Like, why do this time around? Was it like something you saw in the market, or was it the data was a different, like smaller market, or like why, what was your thinking like doing this company as opposed to something else?
Building in the CFO space, I've loved it. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's a very challenging space because I mean the nature of the CFO office is oftentimes to manage and control costs, and they walk the talk, right? They don't buy that much software. The problems within finance and accounting are challenging because there's no silver bullet. There's no one thing. It's more like a million small things, and there's complexity in the culmination of all the many small things. And I've loved building in it. I continue to enjoy building in it. So that part has been consistent. The specific problem within it was very market driven. We talk about pivots in early stage startups, right? It was certainly a series of I like to call it micro pivots. It was always within the CFO sphere, but pivoting within it to understand who exactly is the user and what exactly is their problem, not just from a technological standpoint. I think that was my mistake the first time around, Daniel. Whenever people ask about what we did, I obsessed over the technology. Never really got to the use case and the value prop. So that was a learning the first time around.
I mean, the first time around, it sounds like I don't know if it was a good exit or a bad exit, but it sounds like when you focus on the user, that's the best place to be. Like Paul Graham always talks about like make one person happy, like Sam Altman, or a small group of users. Like it sounds like you're doing that this time around. I guess the first time around you focused on the technology, which did it work? Or do you feel like that was like what made that company work or not work? What was the learnings from that?
The company is still around and my ex-co-founders are still running it. They've certainly hit their stride. They figure certain things out. I think where we didn't, at least when the three of us working together and didn't figure something out, financial analysts would say one of the big problems was bringing data together, collecting data from all these places. And I think that makes sense. There's a lot of data wrangling that needs to happen. So what can we do from a data pipeline standpoint to bring that data together? Yes, there's things we can do there. But the interface that the user experienced, we needed them to write SQL. Finance people don't deal in SQL day to day, right? They work within Excel and they were trained in it in college. If they go through investment banking, they can build a very large, complex, sophisticated Excel model, a financial model without ever touching their mouse. We continue to keep pushing SQL. And so we ended up having to write the SQL for them while they may have liked the dashboards. That was a disconnect in the user experience of what we needed to do. Now, I left the company May of, 2022. Stu and Dixon continue to run it. And from what I can see, they figured out a few things. They've pivoted away from finance into more of a pure play data play. But yeah, I think they're doing well.
Got it. I mean, that's another thing. It's like leaving your first startup is really hard. It sounds like they were in the thick of it. You were in the thick of it with them. Like it's very brave to leave that because it's almost like, you have that momentum in the first startup and leaving that as a hard thing. Like were they like, I guess, running it and you felt less passionate about it as the direction of the company became more apparent, or was it just natural you got more passionate about like something else?
Their skill set, yeah. So I'm gonna tackle your question from the lens of kind of the co-founder relationship and the vision of the company. Stu and Dixon, my ex-co-founders, they were friends before, and then I met them through an introduction of one of our mutual close friends. Worked well together. We got along very well together. All three of us were in San Francisco, so we worked together in person, building kind of the intersection of finance and data. But as we continued in the journey, the product direction leaned more towards solving the data problems rather than the user's finance experience. And so that was clearly the focus of the company and where the company was headed. And for me, it was I want to build a finance solution. I want to build for the office of the CFO rather than the data team. It's where I could be the most effective, where I can make the largest impact. Whereas on a data product, those two would do far better without me. And so as it became more apparent that was the direction of the company, it made more sense for me to bow out and for them to continue running the company. So, as you said, Daniel, no matter what, it's hard, right? And it was definitely hard. And I really enjoyed working with them, but it was for the best. It was the way it needed to have gone. Fortunately, dusted myself off, wanted to run it back. Certainly did feel a sense of unfinished business from building for my customer, but also what I wanted to achieve in building a startup. Met Tennyson, fantastic, brilliant product engineer, and it's been a hell of a ride since.
Awesome. And I guess like leaving that startup, and the first startup was YC, like you just reapplied like right after you left, or was it a little bit of time? You took some time off?
A little bit. My group partner the first time around was Jared Friedman, and when we went through the founder separation, chatted with him. Sometimes YC partners they can give advice in many different ways. It could be very direct. It could be a little bit vague. Depends how you want to interpret it. Jared was very kind of, he emphasized force yourself. I think he used the word force yourself to take some time off. And he gave me like a certain number of months, suggested a certain number of months. Because, after you go through a founder separation, there is a lot of energy built up, and it could be some positive, it could be some negative. I think it was really sound advice that he gave me to take some time off. So I took 2 months, shot hoops every day. I played basketball in college, still play basketball today every week, but never, you don't have time to go shoot around anymore. Just shot around every day, took the dog to the dog park, and shot hoops while he played. And then the girlfriend went to work. And gradually in that process, kind of put myself back out there, met more people, went to more events, dabbled in ideas. So it was a very gradual transition back into starting another company. I admittedly thought about applying to YC for that summer batch. It's a good idea not to, it would have been far too rushed. And so took my time, did things right, figured out what I wanted to build, built an MVP, found a co-founder, got my first customers, and then applied to YC the second time.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations also on getting in 2 times. I feel like a lot of founders get in once, they do apply again, and some founders don't get in again. So there is something YC sees in you that like they really believe in, and that's
Thanks, man.
great. Yeah, it's any tips for the audience? Because a lot of the people listening don't know how to get into Y Combinator. Like, what are some tips that you could just talk through for people, just so they know, like, how do I even apply, or like, what was it? What do you think it was about you and like you getting in twice? Like, clearly there's something about you that made them really want to work with you.
That you'll have to ask the admissions team at YC. I can walk through my thought process. Uh, I think that YC has a lot of videos about, how to apply to YC, how to get in. And I think in all of those videos, they give this advice of like build a great company. And when you do that, Or as you're doing that, spend an afternoon, apply to YC. Don't think too much. Don't slave over every word. They get a ton of applications, so they have to read through things quickly, keep things simple. But admittedly, it's hard to follow that advice, right? You think about, all right, there's an application, I got to string together the right set of words, the right message, the right whatever it is. And admittedly, I did go through a little bit of that myself, make sure the application was perfect. But I think I did manage to stay focused on build an MVP. I'm not a software developer, but there are enough low code options out there to string something together. With that, when I met my co-founder, Tennyson, awkward thing in co-founder dating is you're like talking towards each other. But when Tennyson and I met, we were talking about the product. Because I had built something janky and so janky, like there was one series of workflows. You click, 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 and it followed that string. If you click something else, nothing would have happened. But we started talking about the product. And then I was able to put it in his hands, and in a week, he was able to like revamp it, make it far better. Meanwhile, I kept talking to users, getting them to sign up and pay. Ask your customer to pay. If they're not going to pay, that should be enough of a cue for you to go the other way. And you might say, well, how could you ask them to pay if you don't have anything yet? It's the hard thing about being a startup founder, right? Got to find a way to, and there are ways to get them to commit. So all these things, I think, are tactical ways to help your business forward. You get the customer to pay, they want it. You go build something, and then you keep rinsing and repeating that cycle. I think if you're doing that, your application is going to become very apparent as to what it needs to say, what message you want to communicate, and not the other way around. That's what I would say.
Really, really good advice. Agam, sorry, I've been dominating. Maybe you want to jump in and ask some questions.
No, yeah, that's great, Daniel. I'm learning a lot about YC and about startup culture, how you get your investors on. But I just want to just get some. You said a lot of times about user experience and talking to users. Uh, just to give a gist of when you interact with users, what kind of questions do you have in your mind? Do you keep them on an open book, just look at the product we have built and give us a feedback, like what would you like to have in it? Like how do you go with user interviews and how do you make most out of it?
I think the early user interviews I went into, I was trying to figure out the right questions to ask. And so I would throw different questions out there. I may not have been as well prepared. And as a result, it was certainly less effective, but it was the learning I needed to go through to figure out which questions taught me what I needed to know and which questions kind of built empathy and a closer tie with the user to show them like I understand your space and the pain you're going through. Once you figure that out, though, you should not be throwing things on the wall. Should always be throwing things on the wall to see if it sticks. But then you go from a vague set of it could be any questions into I need to ask these 10. And based off of what I learned there might be a few more questions I follow on afterwards. So it always starts with casting a little bit of a wide net and then narrowing as you figure out. Well, I like to use the example with like the doors. You see a bunch of doors in front of you, you got to figure out which doors are going to open. All right, there's 10, only one opens. You got to walk through that door. You don't have a choice. Once you go through that door, there might be 5 doors. Now you get to choose a few more to walk through. That's how I think about go to market. You kind of need to earn the right to take that next step. So similar, cast a wide net. Now you've learned, you need to narrow it and make sure you concentrate your efforts. And then you got to go try the next initiative after that.
Another thing which you touched upon is about getting them to pay you before you have developed the product or you don't have something to show up with them. Like that's one of the toughest part in the early stage companies, and that's where you really need to earn the trust of the user. So how do you go with that? And if you have some tips on early stage startups to gain customers.
This is gonna sound a little bit lame, but the first thing that comes to mind is to make the ask. I think so often people don't make the ask because look, it's scary, right? It's the fear of rejection. It's a terrifying thing. And I think that's one of the muscles you need to get, is getting over that fear of rejection and making the difficult ask, because they might say yes. And if they say yes, well, you would never have known if you never made the ask. But I think there are like other tactical ways to nurture your way there, such as asking, look, is there some sort of agreement that we can put in place so that I know you're motivated to use this, and then that will give us what we need to build it the way you need it to be built? Is there a, what do you call it? Letter of intent that you can sign, or maybe sign an agreement where there's like a low risk trial period. There's all these different structures where you can minimize the financial risk on the customer, but you are increasing their time spent on you. And if you meet the threshold, it moves on to the next step. So there's different creative ways that you can structure something, but it all boils down to where you make the ask. And I think that's hard, still hard.
I think that's one of the things YC really pushes on their founders is make the ask for the contract to have
Right.
something signed. Um, awesome. I guess another question I have for you, and this is a question like I think because well, I follow your company and I think you guys are all in person. Do you have an in-person mind like culture? Do you have a remote culture? Like what's your vision like long term for like what you guys are building?
I love that we appear in person. It's unfortunately not true.
Oh, okay. So you guys are remote. Okay.
We are. I won't hide the fact that I want to build an in-person company. We're actually in our new office. Sorry, I have the virtual background on, but we were in a co-working space with a bunch of other YC companies for a year. Batchmates from Winter 23 had a blast together. Some of us were growing out of it, so two of us left to get our own offices, and we got a pretty sweet loft, kind of a loft office in Soma. However, the Truewind company is remote. We have team members in New York, in Seattle, and Los Angeles. We've developed a very strong disciplined operating cadence to work well as a remote team. And I think you need a healthy balance of heads down time versus dedicated time to come together versus ad hoc time to come together. And when you have a high performing team, you do figure it out. However, it doesn't mean we're a remote company forever. My team knows that I still want to build an in-person team. So it's on the horizon. I just need to figure out how to go about doing it.
Got it. Got it. I mean, Just Paid is also a remote company, so we're in the same boat. What would make a successful remote company since you're remote right now? Like, what is some tricks that create like a fun culture for you and like what you guys are building? Like, I guess time zones, that sort of thing. Like, how do you deal with all of these different things to help build that culture?
Right. I think so. The three things that I talked about, having dedicated heads down time, dedicated time to come together, but also ad hoc gatherings. Um, I'm very particular about which meetings we put on the calendar. I'm also very particular about minimizing recurring meetings. But the interesting thing here is my co-founder is the opposite. And we've managed to make it work harmoniously where the certain engineering meetings that he wants to be recurring, great, you should do that. But then other meetings may not be. I think what the culture that the most important piece is the last one, the ad hoc get together. And I think this is instilled more through kind of the culture that you want to try building. When everyone is a high performer, I think there's this sense of I should do my work and they should do their work, and that's it. But I think creative genius comes at the intersection of different people coming together, especially from different groups. So early on, it was me making those meetings happen. Hey, Matt from engineering. Hey, Jose from go-to-market. There's this working session that needs to happen. Let's get on an hour-long call. And one of us is going to prepare a memo in advance. Not the 6-page memo that Bezos is talking about, but more like half a page or a couple paragraphs, right? So I know what to expect. Now we're going to have a working session. Like we're actually going to jam on it, open up like a spreadsheet or a Google Doc and get pen to paper. Once I started doing that a few times, more and more people started doing it themselves. Gotta say, Daniel, that was a beautiful thing to see. But since you asked that question, I want to hear from you because it's something I'm still learning about. What have you guys done as a remote company that have worked? So this is me trying to pick your brain here.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I do is I every week I do the weekend report, which is I make everybody tell me about their weekend. And I think it's like permeated throughout the whole company where people actually know about their personal lives a lot more, even though it's hard to do through Zoom, right? Like we do a lot of Zoom meetings all the time. There are a lot of ad hoc meetings, there's a lot of recurring meetings, but that's like one of the things where I actually notice people are, I kind of know what people are doing on the weekends. It's kind of fun to like know who they are as a person. They don't hide it. They're really open about it. It, you know, I mean, working with Agam knows like we kind of talk about our personal lives quite a bit, and it helps like create that connection. I feel like it lets me know who he is, and we met in person a couple, like I think we met in person once, Agam. That's it, right? So like,
Just once.
yeah, that was it. So we met in person once, and it was kind of a lot of information that got flying around. Like I had a small get together at my house, and Agam came and he met my other co-founders, and I don't know, that was invaluable, honestly, like meeting Agam in person. But he also met other YC founders. I think I had Marcoa over and a few other people, and it was just a really good time. But I think if people are in the area, like trying to make time for them. If they're not, that's okay. But um, cadence and engineering, I think our engineering team is there's a heavy cadence in meeting a lot, like daily. So there's a lot there, but that's a little bit of our culture. I really like the weekend report. It's like the fun thing for me because
I
it's
like
just,
that. I like that idea a lot. Thanks for suggesting it.
yeah, yeah. Awesome. I know we're running up on time. Maybe Agam, you could take it away and like end with some questions and um yeah, I guess Agam, I'll let you take the lead for the last couple of questions.
Sure. Yeah, Alex, thank you so much. Yeah, I just felt like, the time is passing by very quickly. So, just to know about like your journey and successfully being founding two great startups, like I know there's gonna be great as well, Truewind. So, what are the few learnings which you have got along the journey and like, do's and don'ts about startups, starting a company, pitching to investors, being in VC, working in VC as well, some things which you should take care of while you are pitching your ideas or your company. Like just some learnings you have along your journey and some tips which you would like to share with someone like me whose vision is to start a company or get into startups 5 years, 10 years down the line, something which you really want you would have done before you got into it.
Well, hopefully it's sooner than 5, 10 years down the line. Agam, what was your major? What's your background in?
So I have like a background in mechanical engineering. I did my bachelor's in mechanical,
Okay.
and I did my master's in technology management from New York University. So kind of more like uh, it's like it's not specific to one particular industry. It's open, wide open. It can I can pivot into anything. And since a year, I'm more focused towards the payments industry and fintech. That's where my focus is currently.
Good. Okay, thanks for that clarity. I was an aerospace engineer. The aerospace and mechanical engineering department were the same. So I took a lot of mechanical engineering classes, mechatronics being one of the most difficult classes I've ever taken. The thing I want to talk about here is finding a co-founder. I think I've done a good job of that in both of my companies, especially because we're building a software company and I don't write software. And my ex co-founders are brilliant, talented. Tennyson, my current co-founder, is brilliant and talented. And so I want to talk a bit about that. While I was an aerospace engineer before, as far as starting a software startup goes, I'm the non-technical founder. I think finding a co-founder is actually very, very difficult. Even if you're spent a lot of time in Silicon Valley and have a strong network here, even though there's a high contingency of potential founders, when you go down the list of someone who's interested in the same thing as you, someone who is complementary to you in skill, and somebody who's available, when you go down that list of three criteria, suddenly you don't have anyone left. There might be one or two people. It's actually very difficult to meet all three. And so my advice to non-technical founders, if you're looking to build a software company, find a technical co-founder. Don't kid yourself. Because if I did not have a technical co-founder, that would mean I still own engineering. Even if I had, engineers on the team, that means I'm still managing them. Well, with Tennyson, like that is entirely off my plate, and he does it far better than I can. Now, if you want to start something, that would require mechanical engineering, like you know it inside out, that's your bread and butter. You can run that. But if you're looking to start a software company, put in the time to find a co-founder. And when it comes to finding a co-founder, I always say have a very high bar for saying yes and a very low bar for saying no. One thing that Tennyson and I did unexpectedly that worked out so well, he came to spend the holidays with me and my family in Seattle. So my parents' place, 4 bedroom, my brother and his plus one, me and my plus one, Tennyson and his plus one, and my parents, all 8 of us spent 10 days together in that house, barely left. When you spend 7 to 10 days straight with someone 24/7, you really get to know someone. You're showering in the same bathroom, when you're eating at the same kitchen, hanging out with each other day and night, you really get to know somebody. So that's something I always suggest people do. And I recognize if you have kids, it's going to be difficult. You may not be able to pull it off, but even like a weekend getaway, 2, 3 days, you really get to know somebody if you do something like that. So that's what I would say. And the journey always starts, I think, with you need to have the right co-founder because it's a 7, 10 year journey.
It's really good advice. That's actually awesome advice. Awesome. I mean, I think that's a great way to honestly end is looking for a co-founder, finding somebody like if you want to start a company with. But I guess last question for you. If someone wants to use Truewind, like or wants to get a demo, where would they go? How would they find you? Are you on LinkedIn? Like what's the best way to like work with Truewind?
Thanks for letting me give that plug. We're very active and public on what we do on LinkedIn, but all you have to do is go to truewind.ai and there's a book a demo button, and you'll get right in touch with either me or someone from our growth team, probably both of us. I still try
Aw-
to.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, awesome. Thank you so much, Alex, for this interview. It was really great, really insightful.
Daniel,
Um,
this was kind of fun. All the questions that you asked, I wish I could hear your answer to it as well. Big fan of you as a founder from your first company, also your second. So thanks for having me here, man.
awesome. Awesome. Well, thanks again. And thank you so much, Alex. Yeah, I'll let you get back to work. I'm sure you got a lot of things going on. So
Thanks, fellas.
cool.
Bye,
Okay.
Agam.
Thank you,
Bye.
Alex. Yeah, it was great.